Welcome to Uncovered Images. Today we're about to take you on a journey through time with a collection that has remained hidden for over a century. 123 photographs that capture the untold story of America's wildest frontier days. These images weren't meant to be seen until now. My name is Daniel Cooper. 3 months ago, while clearing out my great-grandfather's abandoned property in Wyoming, I discovered a sealed metal box buried beneath the floorboards of his study. Inside were stacks of glass plate negatives, daguerreotypes, and early paper prints, all remarkably preserved. What they revealed has haunted me ever since. The photographs date from 1868 to 1887, a period when the western frontier was still largely ungoverned territory. The images were taken by my great-grandfather, Thomas Cooper, a photographer who traveled throughout Wyoming, Montana, and the Dakota territories, documenting life in these untamed lands. But these weren't the typical frontier photographs of the era. No staged portraits of settlers standing proudly in front of their homesteads. No romantic vistas celebrating manifest destiny. These were raw, unfiltered glimpses into the shadow side of westward expansion, the parts of history deliberately erased from our collective memory. The first set of photographs shows a frontier town called Blackwater. You won't find it on any modern maps. According to my great-grandfather's journals, which I found alongside the photographs, Blackwater was a settlement that appeared almost overnight in 1868, following rumors of gold deposits in the nearby hills. The initial images show a typical boomtown taking shape. Hastily constructed wooden buildings, muddy streets, horses tied to hitching posts, men in wide-brimmed hats entering and exiting saloons. But there's something unsettling about these first images. If you look closely at the backgrounds, you'll notice armed men positioned on rooftops, watching the streets below. In one photograph, a group of men stand at the edge of town, rifles in hand, facing outward toward the surrounding wilderness, as if guarding against some imminent threat. My great-grandfather's journal entries from this period describe a town gripped by paranoia. "The men of Blackwater speak in whispers," he wrote. "They trust neither stranger nor neighbor. Every night they post sentries at the town's perimeter. They call it protection against Indian raids, but I sense they fear something else entirely." Thomas Cooper arrived in Blackwater with his mobile photography studio, a modified wagon containing his cameras, glass plates, and chemical supplies. One photograph shows his own setup, a cramped but meticulously organized workspace where he created the images we're examining today. His journal notes that he was initially welcomed as someone who could help put Blackwater on the map and attract more settlers and investment. The town council, led by a man named Harrison Mills, commissioned me to photograph Blackwater's development. He wrote, "Mills speaks of progress and opportunity, but his eyes never match his words. He's a man harboring secrets, and I suspect the camera he invited into this town may eventually capture things he never intended to be seen." The next series of photographs, dated 1870, reveals what the town became just 2 years later. The population had swelled to over 300 souls, but something had fundamentally changed in Blackwater's character. The images show streets now lined with gambling houses, brothels, and opium dens. Men wearing badges patrol the thoroughfare, but their expressions bear no resemblance to the righteous lawmen celebrated in dime novels. These men have the cold, calculating gaze of predators. One photograph shows the town's jail, a crude wooden structure reinforced with iron bands. Outside stand 7 men, all wearing identical badges. One holds a ledger open for the camera. It appears to be a record of prisoners and fines. My great-grandfather's journal explains the town's unique justice system. In Blackwater, the law is whatever Sheriff Mills decides it is. Travelers passing through find themselves arrested on fabricated charges, their possessions confiscated as evidence, their money taken as fines. Those who resist are never seen again. Harrison Mills, once merely the head of the town council, had declared himself sheriff. Thomas Cooper's journal describes his transformation. Mills no longer pretends to serve the town. He struts through the streets in a black duster coat with silver spurs that announce his approach. His deputies, mostly men with violent pasts recruited from passing gangs, enforce his will without question. They wear their badges like licenses to prey upon the vulnerable. Perhaps most disturbing is the photograph taken inside what appears to be the sheriff's office. Hanging on the wall is a map of the surrounding territory with X marks scattered across it. In his journal, Thomas Cooper writes, "I asked Deputy Harlan about the markings on their map. He laughed and said they were locations of unfortunate accidents involving travelers who carried too much gold and too little sense. The most telling photograph from this period shows a stagecoach being stopped at the edge of town. Armed men surround it while the passengers are forced to disembark. The sheriff can be seen examining their luggage. My great-grandfather writes, "Today I witnessed Sheriff Mills and his deputies welcome a stagecoach from Cheyenne. They claimed to be conducting a search for wanted criminals. What they were really doing was identifying wealthy passengers who might be relieved of their valuables during their stay." By 1872, the photographs document Blackwater's transformation into a fortress town. New wooden walls encircled the settlement, with guard towers positioned at regular intervals. One particularly striking image shows the main gate, where all visitors were required to surrender their weapons before entering. Thomas Cooper wrote, "No one enters Blackwater armed except for Mills and his men. The town has become his personal kingdom, with residents as much prisoners as subjects." A series of portraits from this period shows the changing faces of Blackwater's residents. The hopeful expressions of early settlers had transformed into something harder, more guarded. Thomas notes, "The people here wear masks now, not physical disguises, but the blank expressions of those who have learned to reveal nothing. They avert their eyes when Mills or his men pass by. They've discovered that in Blackwater, to be noticed is to be in danger." The photographs from 1873 reveal a new dimension to Blackwater's story. A series of images shows a large compound being constructed at the edge of town, a compound suspiciously similar to a mining operation. Men can be seen working under armed guard. My great-grandfather's notes explain, "The rumors of gold that birthed this town were deliberate fiction. There is no gold in these hills, but there is something else, something Sheriff Mills and his partners have been extracting from the earth using forced labor. I've heard whispers of a strange black stone that burns hotter and longer than coal." The compound photographs show men emerging from mine shafts, their faces blackened, their expressions haunted. Thomas Cooper writes, "The miners are a combination of unfortunate travelers sentenced to work off their fines, and local men who fell into debt with Mills's organization. Few survive more than 6 months in the mines. Those who do emerge changed, coughing black phlegm, their skin sallow, their eyes vacant." One photograph shows what appears to be a medical examination. A man in a doctor's coat inspects the bare chest of a miner while making notes. Thomas explains, "Dr. Warren conducts weekly examinations of the miners, not to treat their ailments, but to determine who remains fit for work and who should be retired. Those deemed no longer useful simply disappear. The townspeople whisper about a ravine beyond the northern ridge where bodies are discarded." By 1875, the photographs document the arrival of a new figure in Blackwater, a man identified in my great-grandfather's journal as Augustus Blackwood. Unlike the rough-hewn Sheriff Mills, Blackwood wears fine Eastern clothing and carries himself with aristocratic bearing. Several photographs show him inspecting the mining operation, conferring with Mills, and examining ledgers. Thomas Cooper's journal entry is revealing. Blackwood is clearly the money behind this operation. He arrived with engineers from Pennsylvania who have brought new equipment for the mines. Whatever they're extracting from the earth here, it's valuable enough to warrant significant investment. Blackwood speaks with a Boston accent, but has the cold eyes of a man who has never known conscience. One photograph shows Blackwood addressing Blackwater's prominent citizens at a dinner held in his honor. Thomas writes, "Blackwood spoke of progress and the nation's future, claiming that what they're extracting here will power America's industrial transformation. He offered partnerships to those with enough capital to invest. Many eagerly accepted, blind to the fact that they were signing away not just their money but their complicity in what's happening here." The photographs from this period show a strange dichotomy in Blackwater. The main street now features a newly constructed hotel of surprising luxury, where Blackwood and his associates stay during their visits. Yet just blocks away, ramshackle housing for miners deteriorates in squalid conditions. One particularly powerful image shows both structures in the same frame, opulence and misery coexisting in the same frontier town. Perhaps the most disturbing photographs from this period are those showing what my great-grandfather called the disappearing ground. In these images, taken at the outskirts of the mining operation, large sinkholes have opened in the earth. Men can be seen attempting to fill them with timber supports. Thomas Cooper writes, "Whatever they're removing from beneath Blackwater, it's causing the very earth to collapse. 3 miners were lost yesterday when the ground simply swallowed them. Mills ordered the incident not to be discussed." The collection includes several surreptitious photographs of town meetings held in 1876, where residents can be seen arguing with Sheriff Mills and his deputies. My great-grandfather's notes explain the growing tension. The townspeople have finally realized they're as much prisoners as proprietors here. They came seeking fortune, but found themselves trapped in Mills's domain. Some are planning to leave, but Mills has made it clear no one abandons Blackwater. One particularly striking photograph shows a woman confronting Mills in the town square. Her finger is pointed at his chest, her face contorted with rage. Thomas identifies her as Sarah Connolly, whose husband died in the mines. She demanded to know where her husband was buried so she could give him a proper Christian funeral. Mills told her that company property is disposed of at the company's discretion. The look that passed between them contained enough hatred to burn the whole town down. One particularly chilling photograph shows the aftermath of what appears to be a failed escape attempt. A wagon lies overturned at the edge of town, its contents scattered. No bodies are visible, but dark stains mark the ground. Thomas Cooper writes, "The Henderson family attempted to leave before dawn. Mills' men were waiting. Mr. Henderson was taken to the mines. Mrs. Henderson and their daughter were escorted to a building Mills calls the Hotel for Difficult Ladies. I fear for their fate." By 1877, the photographs document increasing unrest in Blackwater. Several images show armed confrontations in the streets, residents facing off against Mills' deputies. My great-grandfather writes, "The powder keg has finally ignited. When Mills' men came for young Michael Connolly, accused of stealing from the company store, his father resisted. In the ensuing gunfight, 3 townspeople and 1 deputy died. Now the town is divided, those still loyal to Mills, those secretly plotting against him, and those simply trying to survive until they can escape." A series of photographs shows makeshift barricades being erected after dark, only to be torn down by deputies the following day. Thomas notes, "A war of wills unfolds in Blackwater. By day, Mills maintains control. By night, the resistance tests its strength. Blood has been spilled and there's no going back to how things were. Something must break, and soon." The next series of photographs, dated 1878, document the arrival of a new element to this powder keg. A group of men my great-grandfather identifies as the Mason brothers. Unlike the rough miners or the aristocratic Blackwood, these men have the weathered look of frontiersmen who've spent their lives in the wilderness. Several photographs show them conferring with discontented townspeople in shadowy corners of saloons. Thomas Cooper's journal provides context. The Mason brothers, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Levi, arrived last month claiming to be hunters selling pelts. In truth, they're something far more dangerous. Idealists. They've heard stories of Blackwater from those few who managed to escape, and they've come with the express purpose of liberating the town from Mills' control. They speak of justice and liberation with religious fervor. I fear they underestimate the ruthlessness of the forces they oppose. A photograph shows Jeremiah Mason, the eldest brother, sharing a drink with Thomas Cooper. My great-grandfather writes, "Mason sought me out, having heard I document everything in Blackwater. History needs witnesses, he told me, especially to injustice. He has the quiet intensity of a man shaped by personal tragedy." When I asked what brought him to Blackwater, he said only that he'd seen what mining companies did to communities and the land in Colorado. "Some debts can't be paid in money," he said, "only in justice." The most striking photograph from this period shows what appears to be a secret meeting in a barn at the edge of town. By lantern light, Jeremiah Mason stands addressing a crowd of about 20 townspeople. Their expressions show a mixture of hope and fear. Thomas Cooper writes, "The resistance grows by night while presenting a mask of compliance by day. Mills suspects something but cannot identify all involved. His response has been to increase the brutality of his enforcement, which only drives more townspeople into the arms of the Masons." The photographs from early 1879 document escalating tensions. One image shows the public whipping of a man Thomas Cooper identifies as a supporter of the Masons. Another shows increased patrols by Mills's deputies, now armed with newer, more powerful weapons. Most tellingly, several photographs show the construction of a gallows in the town square. My great-grandfather writes, "Mills has abandoned any pretense of legal process. The gallows stands as a warning to all who might challenge his authority." Yesterday, he hanged William Foster for seditious speech. Foster's actual crime was refusing to allow his 16-year-old daughter to entertain Blackwood during his latest visit. The next photograph is particularly haunting. It shows the town gathered for the execution, but all eyes are turned not toward the gallows, but toward the hills beyond the town, where a plume of dark smoke rises. Thomas Cooper explains, as Foster stood with the noose around his neck, an explosion rocked the mining compound. The masons had made their first strike, using dynamite to collapse the main shaft. Mills's men abandoned the execution to address the greater threat, and in the confusion, the townspeople cut Foster down and spirited him away. The photographs from mid-1879 document what my great-grandfather calls the Blackwater Uprising. A series of images shows armed confrontations in the streets, barricades erected, buildings ablaze, men firing from windows and rooftops. The once orderly mining town has descended into outright warfare. Thomas Cooper writes with palpable tension, for 3 days now, the battle for Blackwater has raged. The Masons and their supporters control the north side of town, while Mills and his deputies hold the south side and the mining compound. Blackwood and his engineers fled at the first sign of trouble, abandoning Mills to deal with the insurrection. Casualties mount on both sides. I continue to document everything, though doing so places me in grave danger. One photograph shows Ezekiel Mason, the youngest brother, leading a charge against a deputy stronghold. Thomas notes, Ezekiel fights with the reckless courage of youth. While Jeremiah plans and Levi negotiates, Ezekiel burns with righteous anger. Today I watched him lead a group of miners in taking the company store, a symbolic victory that provided much-needed supplies to the resistance. Several photographs show the makeshift field hospital established in the town church, where women tend to wounded men from both factions. My great-grandfather notes, in suffering, the artificial divisions Mills created begin to dissolve. I witnessed a deputy, wounded in the leg, being treated alongside a miner he had whipped just a week prior. The women of Blackwater, long treated as commodities to be traded and exploited, have emerged as the conscience of this conflict, reminding both sides of their common humanity. The most powerful photograph from this period shows Jeremiah Mason and Sheriff Mills meeting under a flag of truce in the center of town. Both men are wounded, their faces etched with exhaustion. Thomas Cooper's journal entry provides the context. After 5 days of bloodshed, with nearly 40 dead and twice that many wounded, the leaders agreed to parley. Mason demanded the liberation of the miners, the restoration of property to those robbed by Mills's false arrests, and safe passage for any who wished to leave Blackwater. Mills, running low on ammunition and men willing to die for him, had little choice but to negotiate. A close-up photograph of Mills during the negotiation reveals a man transformed by the uprising. Thomas writes, Mills's arrogance has been replaced by something like fear. The invincible sheriff has discovered his mortality. When Mason offered him safe passage out of the territory in exchange for surrender, I saw relief flicker across Mills's face before he masked it with his customary scowl. He's a man who recognizes defeat but is too proud to acknowledge it openly. The photographs from late 1879 document the uneasy peace that followed. Several images show miners being released from their forced labor, reuniting with families, their gaunt faces a testament to their ordeal. Other photographs show wagons being prepared, loaded with possessions as families make ready to depart from Blackwater forever. One particularly moving photograph shows a mass grave being dug for the conflict's casualties, with former enemies working side by side in the somber task. Thomas Cooper writes, in death at least, the people of Blackwater found equality. They lie together now, oppressors and oppressed, in the rocky soil they fought over. But the story of Blackwater was far from over. The photographs from early 1880 document a disturbing development. Several images show Augustus Blackwood returning to town, this time accompanied by a group of men wearing federal marshal's badges. Thomas Cooper's journal expresses his alarm. Blackwood has powerful connections in Washington. The men he brought bear the trappings of federal authority, but their eyes hold the same mercenary gleam as Mills' deputies. They've come with arrest warrants for the Mason brothers and anyone who supported the uprising, charging them with interference with vital national interests. A series of photographs shows these so-called marshals conducting arrests throughout town, binding men and women alike in chains. My great-grandfather writes with evident distress, the liberation was short-lived. Blackwood's influence has transformed oppression by a corrupt sheriff into oppression sanctioned by distant government authority. Those who fought hardest for freedom are now branded criminals. One photograph shows Blackwood conferring with a man Thomas identifies as Senator Lawless from Pennsylvania. He writes, "The senator arrived to assess the situation. In truth, he came to assure Blackwood that his investment would be protected by federal force if necessary. I overheard him say that the coal from these mines was essential to national security and that local disruptions cannot be allowed to interfere with progress." The fate of Blackwater is being decided in parlors in Washington, not by those who actually live here. The most heartbreaking photograph from this period shows Ezekiel Mason being led to a prison wagon, his hands bound, his face bloodied, but his posture still proud. Thomas Cooper notes, "They captured Ezekiel today. Jeremiah and Levi remain at large, having fled to the hills with a band of miners unwilling to surrender. Blackwood has placed a bounty on their heads that has attracted a dozen bounty hunters to Blackwater." The photographs from mid-1880 document Blackwater's transformation yet again. The mining operation resumed with even greater intensity, now protected by men claiming federal authority. New equipment arrived, more advanced machinery that allowed for faster extraction. One photograph shows a newly constructed railroad spur reaching the mining compound, allowing for direct shipment of whatever they were extracting. Thomas Cooper's journal reveals his growing understanding of the larger forces at work. "I've finally learned what makes this isolated valley so valuable. The Blackstone is actually a rare form of anthracite coal with unusual properties. It burns hotter and cleaner than any other coal in America." Blackwood represents a consortium of Eastern industrialists who stand to make millions from controlling this resource. The dispute in Blackwater was never about law or order. It was about who would profit from what lies beneath the soil. A series of photographs shows the environmental transformation of the valley. What had once been a lush landscape was becoming scarred and barren. Thomas writes, "The hills are being hollowed out. The streams run black with coal dust. The wildlife has fled. The very air has changed, thick with particles that coat the lungs and sting the eyes. This isn't just the story of a town being exploited. It's the story of a landscape being sacrificed." The photographs from late 1880 show the final transformation of Blackwater from frontier town to industrial outpost. The wooden buildings of the main street were being replaced with brick structures. The saloons and brothels were giving way to company offices and warehouses. Even the name was changing. Official documents now referred to the settlement as Blackwood Coal Company Town Number 7. My great-grandfather writes, "The frontier dies not with a bang, but with the scratch of a pen on incorporation papers. What was wild is made orderly. What was free is made profitable." The story told will speak of civilization taming wilderness, but those of us who witnessed the transition know it was merely lawlessness of one kind, replaced by lawlessness of another, better disguised kind. But the most remarkable photographs in the collection, and the reason I believe my great-grandfather concealed them, document what happened in the spring of 1881. A series of images, taken at considerable risk based on their hurried composition, show the return of the Mason brothers with a force of nearly 60 men. Some appear to be former miners, others Native Americans from the nearby Shoshone tribe, and still others hardened gunmen drawn perhaps by payment or principle. Thomas Cooper's journal crackles with tension. "They came before dawn, emerging from the mist like avenging spirits." Jeremiah led the miners and gunmen in an assault on the company compound, while Levi and his Shoshone allies cut the telegraph lines and blocked the railroad spur. Within an hour, they had overwhelmed the guards and seized control of the entire operation. A dramatic photograph shows the moment Jeremiah Mason confronted Augustus Blackwood in his office. Thomas writes, "Mason didn't kill Blackwood, though many expected him to. Instead, he forced the businessman to witness the destruction of everything he had built. 'I want you to live with this,' Mason told him. 'I want you to remember that some things can't be bought or owned.'" Several photographs document the roundup of Blackwood's men, now disarmed and held under guard in the very same jail where they had imprisoned others. Another photograph shows Jeremiah Mason addressing the townspeople gathered in the square, apparently explaining their plans. My great-grandfather's journal provides the details. Mason told the assembled crowd that they hadn't come to replace one tyranny with another. They had come to destroy the operation entirely. He explained that the mining method Blackwood employed was poisoning the groundwater and destabilizing the entire valley. If it continued, the land would be rendered uninhabitable for generations. He offered every resident a choice: leave with provisions and a share of the company's gold reserve, which the Masons had seized, or stay and help restore the land after they sealed the mines. The next series of photographs documents an exodus, wagons forming a convoy stretching nearly a mile, families packing possessions, the company store being emptied of supplies and distributed among those departing. Thomas Cooper writes, "Two-thirds of the residents chose to leave, accepting Mason's offer of a fresh start elsewhere. Those who remained were mostly folks who had lived in this valley before Blackwater existed, people with deep connection to the land who couldn't bear to abandon it despite what had been done to it." One photograph shows Levi Mason speaking with a group of Shoshone elders. Thomas notes, "Levi has lived among the Shoshone for years and speaks their language fluently. Today he negotiated an agreement. The Masons and those settlers who remained would help restore the valley, and in return, the Shoshone would share their knowledge of how to live in balance with this land. It's an alliance unprecedented in my experience of the frontier. White settlers and native people working together toward a common goal." The most dramatic photographs in the entire collection show what happened next. A sequence of images documents the systematic destruction of the mining operation. Men placing dynamite charges in mine shafts, others removing machinery that could be repurposed, still others preparing to collapse the main company buildings. Thomas Cooper writes with unmistakable awe, "I've never witnessed such methodical demolition. The Masons aren't acting out of blind revenge. Each explosion is calculated to seal the mine shafts permanently while causing minimal damage to the surrounding landscape. Jeremiah, I've learned, worked as a mining engineer before turning against the industry that employed him. He knows precisely how to make these poisoned veins inaccessible to future exploitation." The most stunning photograph shows the moment of detonation, multiple plumes of smoke and debris erupting from the earth, the main company building collapsing in on itself, the railroad trestle tumbling into the valley below. It's an image of destruction that paradoxically represents an act of preservation. My great-grandfather's notes on this image are philosophical. What I witnessed today challenges everything we're told about progress and civilization. These men, branded outlaws and savages, acted to protect what these civilized Eastern businessmen would destroy without a second thought. They chose the land over profit, community welfare over individual gain. In the narrative of American expansion, there is no place for such choices, which is why this story will never appear in any history book. The final photographs in the collection, dated 1887, show what became of the valley 6 years later. The scars of mining have begun to heal. Native grasses reclaim the areas once occupied by company buildings. A small settlement of perhaps 20 households exists where Blackwater once stood, but it bears little resemblance to the boom town it once was. Thomas Cooper's final journal entry explains, "I returned to the valley after 6 years away, expecting to find it abandoned. Instead, I find a community risen from Blackwater's ashes." Former miners work alongside Shoshone families, learning to live with the land rather than extract from it. Jeremiah Mason remains their informal leader, though they have no sheriff, no jail, no formal authority beyond respect freely given. They call their settlement Restoration, a name that speaks to their purpose here. A series of portraits shows the transformed faces of those who remained. Thomas writes, "These are not the same people I photographed years ago. Their eyes have changed. They've shed the desperate hunger that drove them to Blackwater initially. They've found something more valuable than gold or coal. They've found a way of living that doesn't require the exploitation of others or the destruction of the earth." The very last photograph shows Jeremiah Mason, now with streaks of gray in his beard, standing beside a Shoshone elder named Gray Wolf. They're looking out over the valley, where the scars of mining are still visible but softening with time. Thomas Cooper writes, "Mason told me they expect Blackwood or men like him to return someday. Men who see the earth only as a resource to be exploited never truly give up. He said, 'When they come, we'll be waiting.' He asked me not to reveal their location in my travels, a promise I intend to keep. Some stories are better left untold until those who might exploit them are long gone from this earth, and that explains why these photographs remained hidden for nearly 150 years. My great-grandfather Thomas Cooper understood the power of images to tell stories, and the danger that could come from those stories falling into the wrong hands. He documented a struggle that challenges our convenient narratives about how the West was won, about the triumph of civilization over wilderness, about the inexorable march of progress. The story of Blackwater, its corruption, its resistance, its destruction, and its rebirth as restoration, offers a different vision of what might have been possible in America's frontier days. It shows ordinary people standing against forces that would exploit both human beings and the earth itself for profit. It reveals a path not taken in our national development. As I researched these photographs, I tried to find any trace of Blackwater or restoration in historical records. Unsurprisingly, official histories make no mention of either settlement. Maps from the period show only abandoned mining operations in the general vicinity. The valley today is part of protected federal land, its exact location obscured by decades of deliberately inaccurate record-keeping. I believe my great-grandfather continued to correspond with Jeremiah Mason and the people of Restoration for many years, though he kept no record of this communication that might have led authorities to their location. The last entry in his journal, dated 1902, simply states, "The work continues, the land heals. The story waits for the right moment to be told. Perhaps now, over a century later, is finally that moment. Perhaps we're ready to look at these images with clear eyes and recognize the complex, contradictory nature of our frontier past. Not just the triumph of civilization, but also its costs. Not just the conquest of the wilderness, but also the destruction of ways of living harmoniously within it." These photographs don't just expose America's lawless frontier. They expose the lawfulness that often concealed greater crimes than any outlaw committed. They reveal the resistance that has been erased from our histories, the alternatives that were violently suppressed to create the world we now inhabit. Look closely at these images from our past. They might just change how you see our present and the possibilities for our future. This has been Uncovered Images. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe for more hidden histories revealed through remarkable photographs. Until next time, remember that every image tells a story, but the most important stories are often found in the images that were never meant to be seen.